Yes, it's fun, fair most of the time, and it has a compelling story, as well as these cinematic masterpieces that are animated in different styles that tell a very compelling story. I usually don't care for story. In this game, I was glued to my seat, silent, watching what was happening unfolding in front of my eyes. It was crazy. And the combat is freaking amazing. To explain this game, Black Myth Wukong, it's essentially a video juego that has Souls-like systems in conjunction with ARPG-paced combat. For the Soul systems, you have the bonfires being shrines in this game, the souls being will, and even on that note, it removes some of the frustration and arbitrary stuff tied to some of the soul systems, such as when you die, you lose currency. In this game, you don't lose currency at all. So it's kind of nice in that sense. For the combat, it is fast-paced and snappy. Dodging is rather generous, but the dodging wants to reward you for being more articulate and precise in your timing by giving you perfect dodges. When those happen, you'll hear like a freaking meow, and it'll slow down in time, showing you that you did a perfect dodge. And that can be tied to rewards, such as getting more focus back, I think stamina, could be wrong, and other things of the nature. More damage based on your passives that you have active. The dodging is generous though, so if you can't perfect dodge, you'll still be fine. It's about my turn, your turn style combat, but not to the point that it's annoying. Because some games, it's a lot of the boss's turn, and you're just waiting to play the game. In this, you can make it your turn, which is what makes it really fun. And on that note, you have parries and counters. So one parry that people talk about would be the solid rock form. It's a spell you get. You cast it. If the boss hits you, they might break the rock form and they get staggered, or they might break it, go through, but you don't take damage. The counters are the really fun part. In the first and third stance, so it'd be thrust and... it'd be smash and thrust stance. If you light attack and then right before getting hit, you do a heavy attack while having a pip, you do a counterattack. Like you can then follow up with some damage in the thrust stance, but you'll guarantee to do damage in the smash stance. And this is fun. The sound is fun. Doing the attack most of the time will stagger the boss, giving you more of an opportunity, a move, if you will, a moment of opportunity to beat the brakes off the boss you're fighting. Speaking of bosses, they look amazing. The designs, the lore tie-in from, I believe, Journey to the West. I'm not super keyed in on the lore. I just know the bosses look sick from playing the video game. It's insane. The bosses just feel fun. And a lot of bosses, I'd say that some bosses will seem easy, especially out the gate, but that's not a bad thing. It's a linear progression in that sense in terms of difficulty. But even still, there's some bosses in the middle of the game that are harder than anything else you'll come across. But these bosses require some secret things to be accomplished to unlock. To name names, we got Yellow Lung. Absurd. This is probably the most difficult boss in the entire game. A dude named, I can't say his name, I might ruin it because you'll know who he is. There's a secret ending you can get. That's not really spoiling things. It's just saying, like, look out for secret ending if you want. Google it. But just be aware there's another ending to the game you can get. That guy is not very fair. But Yellow Lung is insane. Yin Tiger, brother. He's one of the coolest fights out of any game I've ever played. Not the hardest, but one of the coolest. The way he moves, the way he sounds, everything is absurd. Going back to the combat and whatnot, let's talk about your loadout and stuff, the things you can change, how you can augment your experience, your gameplay and whatnot. So, you have your gear. 4 different pieces, including, well, 5 if you have your weapon as well. That's actually a lie. You have your armor, which is 4 pieces, your weapon, which is 1, your relic, your spirit, your transformations, and then your curio slots. A lot of things you can change. So for your armor, you have different armor sets you can use that have set bonuses, and each piece can have a unique effect in a slot. So you can have 4 pieces that are mix and matched, but they all have unique effects, or you can have all of the same set for set bonuses based on what you're going for. And sometimes there's a 5 set bonus, and it includes your weapon. This can be kind of cool depending on what's going on, and not to spoil things. There's something you can do at the end of the game with a certain set that you then have to play through the game a couple times to unlock to be permanent. So I'm going to say on that note. For weapons, they have their own unique effects as well, and you can unlock different ones. You can progress in your own little trees and get more power in that manner, unlocking secret paths and secret areas in different chapters to get new weapons. And as you progress, there's a new game plus that has more secret weapons that I wasn't aware of that seem pretty fun and cool to use. You have your curio slots, your passive bonuses. You got defense, attack, crit chance, reduction from poison damage, and a few other ones you can have active. And you can increase these by feeding up a certain blacksmith. So you can have basically, I think, 3 slots, maybe 4. I'm not quite sure on that. You have your spirit, an activatable thing you build gauge for. Using it will give you attacks that damage the enemy, or maybe just a set bonus for yourself. Increase your attack by casting it if you get the full cast off. They also give you passives that you can then upgrade the effect of by using currency. So you can upgrade a bunch of stuff. You have a full-on talent tree, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, my bad. This, you can increase your HP, defense, crit chance, crit damage, a bunch of other passives. You have your stances you can put points into and mix and match how you want it to be. You can change it whenever you want to by going to a shrine. You got your smash stance, thrust stance, pole dancing stance. I forgot the name of that one. Then you have your regular attack pattern you can buff, your spin staff pattern you can buff, transformations you can get. And in the transformation menu, the top half affects you all the time. The bottom half only affects you when you're transformed. So on the transformation menu, if it says gives you a bonus while transformed, that's only when you're transformed. But all other things will affect you all the time. I didn't know that. It's pretty good information to have on hand. The combat's fun though, man. I'm a big fan of I-framed combat, invulnerability framed combat that rewards players for quick thinking, being creative, and that's exactly what this game does. You can still get hit though, but when you don't have too much HP and defense and whatnot, getting hit definitely hurts. And on that note, it does make it more rewarding when you kill bosses if they're hitting you pretty hard. So this game is encouraging you not to just spam like a dent. You can still kind of win by doing that, because there is the ability to stagger bosses if you hit them with a certain attack during a certain of their... basically, if you use a heavy attack and you hit them, chances are they'll get staggered and you'll interrupt their combos. This will happen pretty often using smash dance's parry, or the counter there, or the counter from the thrust dance. But the thing I like the most about it is the flow of combat. Because unlike in most Souls games, which I think this game is very Souls-like, when you stagger an enemy, they go into this bent-over state, essentially, and they want you to hit them with a riposta. The thing where you walk up to them, you press a button, and then you thrust them with your weapon, big damage happens, and then they reset, and it's back to the usual thing. In this game, you can stagger bosses, but most of the time, it won't be that long of a window, and it's more akin to Dauntless and Wild Hearts, where you stagger a boss and it's on its side trying to recover. And you continue to attack it, and you can build up focus and do a heavy attack, build up focus and save the pips for later. You have options. And I didn't even mention the spells. That's crazy. There's a bunch of spells you can do. So you got Spellbinder, a secret one you can get, Rock Form. You can make your own clones. Eventually you can have your clones you can copy your big attack, so it looks pretty freaking sick. You have Immobilize, you'll get that pretty early. I think there's like 7, 8, or 9 different spells you can have that you can change the ones you have active. They're set to their own slot. So for instance, you can't have Spellbinder and Immobilize. You got to pick one. But you got so much you can tailor in this game. And back to the whole story stuff, it's good. I watched every cutscene that they played. Sometimes I watch cutscenes multiple times on New Game Plus, or doing the game again, I saw the same cutscene and I watched it again because I enjoyed it that much. The animations are amazing. You'll see some sick animations at the end of every chapter. The art for when you finish a chapter is great too. You see this small depiction of your journey throughout the entire chapter at the end of it. It looks pretty cool. It's just a small detail that adds a lot to me. And all the big details are freaking phenomenal. The major knocks, though, because there are some things that take away from the experience, would be towards the end of the game, the end of Chapter 5, and for the majority of Chapter 6, the bosses break the amazing flow of combat, which for the most part has been you attack the boss, they attack you, you're dodging. It's just constant action. The bosses at the end of the game break this flow, for the most part, by running away. drove me absolutely insane. It wasn't like the bosses got hard for the most part, they just got boring, at least to me. There's a certain pigeon guy at the start of chapter 6 that flies away from you constantly. And then when you can hit him, you might deflect. Staff just deflects off him for a reason, but it's still annoying to me. It reminds me of the aspects I didn't quite love in Monster Hunter World, which is I'm hitting the monster, but I can't hit the monster. There's another monster right after the pigeon, if depending on your pathing, that I'm hitting and I can't hit unless I'm hitting in a certain area. I didn't quite like that. And there is quite literally a lot of just bosses avoiding you. You'll hit it, it'll be beating the brakes off the boss, but it's not even staggered necessarily. And all of a sudden, you get to a certain point, it goes away from you. One of the worst fights in the entire game is the teacup duo in Chapter 5. Oh my gosh. I think the annoying thing is just how it was back to back to back to back to back for boring bosses, in my opinion, and like how they change up the pacing of the fights. And I should also mention on the front of the combat being kind of lackluster in some cases, which it's the small amount of bosses are like this, but they happen in a cluster, which makes it stand out. Big bosses are bad in this game. They look cool. They're awesome to look at. To fight, it is a slog. I'm telling you right now, you will be trying to see your character and you can't. The worst case isn't on a boss, but there's this giant guy with a shield, 2 of them, in Chapter 5. And you can't see your character. The shield blocks it. But the actual bosses you're facing, you don't know what's happening. You don't know what to dodge, because sometimes their attacks aren't that well telegraphed for how big they are, and things are coming at you really quickly, and you can't even see your character. So those fights, you could play blindfolded and have the same success rate as playing when you're fully focused, locked in, and that does not feel very good. Aside from that, though, combat's freaking phenomenal. Those are the main gripes I have. And also, the big bosses and some bosses in general have massive hitboxes, or they have massive visual boxes, but you can't actually hit them. So I was trying to hit him with my freaking staff spin trick that sounds cool and it builds up my focus to a decent degree, I guess. But I'd be on it, walking into the boss as far as I could, and I wouldn't get any hits. That's kind of tragic. And the last knock, it's also a combat thing, would be that you kind of need to get certain items to make some bosses not be nightmares, which I think is not the best design choice. Just make it so the fight is maybe more challenging if you don't do this, but don't make it an abysmal nightmare, which they did. The best example of that is the end of Chapter 4. If you don't get a certain needle, you don't get to have fun, and you'll be sitting there struggle bussing against this boss on second phase forever. You can get him in a second phase, lickety split, but the second he's there, you just die. I almost beat him a couple times, even without having the needle, but it took me an hour and a half to beat him. If I had the needle, I'd kill him first or second try, easily. And knowing that doesn't sit right with me. I don't particularly love the idea of it being a thing in the first place. Like, it'd be cool if you could get an item that can make the fight a little bit easier, but it shouldn't make it an absolute cakewalk, which is the case for Chapter 4 and I believe the end of Chapter 2 as well. If you get certain items, it makes it easier. And the same thing even goes for the secret boss in Chapter 6. You get a fan, and that fight becomes a lot easier. So that's one thing I don't particularly love. But all in all, the combat's phenomenal. The majority of fights look sick. They are sick. And you feel like you're in a movie when you're dodging things correctly and you're getting your attacks in. It brings back the same enjoyment I had playing Dauntless and trying to get good at that game. But in this game, I love that. I hope we get more games along these lines where it's really encouraging that fast-paced flow. I want games that encourage counters more, because Black Myth Wukong is an okay focus on counters, but I want more. I want to where the flow doesn't get interrupted. You can continue like a combo using counters. Light attack, counter. Light attack again, you counter, but it's different this time. You just keep going. That'd be sick. But if you haven't gotten the game yet, you should definitely do it. I recommend it heavily. Now, another thing I don't particularly love is having to play through it a couple times to get a certain armor, to get a certain amount of set bonuses or passive bonuses to then unlock an armor set thing. It's hard to explain. It really is. Essentially, you're supposed to play through the game. You're supposed to play through the game 3 times, getting the true ending 3 times. And after that, you can have all of these points spent in this secret menu I forgot the name of. And then you can get a new moveset whilst using a full set of a certain monster's armor. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a good day.